This lecture explains about default arguments, which is one of the newly introduced features in C# 4.0. Whenever you assign a default value into the parameter of a method, that is called default argument. So you have a method. It can be instance method or static method, and it has a parameter, and you have assigned a default value into the parameter. So whenever you assign a default value into the parameter, you can call it as default argument. Whenever you don't supply the value for the parameter, automatically the default value gets assigned to the parameter. So you are calling the method, but you don't supply the value for this particular parameter 1. Then automatically the default value will be taken. For example, in a banking project, you have a method called calculate interest, and it has a parameter called interest rate. And for the interest rate parameter, you have assigned a default value that is 10.5%. So whenever you don't supply the value for the interest rate parameter, automatically the default value that is 10.5 will be taken. But in case if you supply the value for the parameter, the supplied value will be taken into the parameter. At that time, the default value will be ignored. So this is to avoid bothering passing the input value for the parameter, because in this case the method caller need not worry about the parameter value because there is a default value to be taken. In case if the method caller wants to pass the value, then only he will supply the value for the parameter, otherwise it is optional parameter. So that is the reason the concept of default arguments is also called as optional arguments. Suppose in the methods example project, we have a method called calculate tax that calculates tax based on the cost of the product. That is, if the cost is less than or equal to 20,000, then tax is 10%. In case if the cost is greater than 20,000, then the tax is 12.5%. But I don't want to hardcode the value that is 12.5%. I want to take this as a parameter, and I would like to apply the default value for the same. So we are defining a parameter called percentage, and instead of calculating 12.5%, I am calculating the tax based on the percentage parameter. So at that time it will be cost into percentage by 100. But while calling the method, you must supply the value for the parameter, right? So I switch back to the console application project. This is the place where exactly we are calling that method. So I must supply the value for the parameter. For example, I can give like 9.2%, 7.4%, and 15.2%. You can pass any value as per your choice. Don't worry about reading the values from the keyboard. We are reading all the inputs from the keyboard in the codes project. Please check out that. So when you call the calculate tax method and supply the value that is 9.2 for the parameter called percentage, that value 9.2 will be taken into the parameter called percentage. And if the cost is greater than 20,000, in that case the tax will be calculated as cost into percentage by 100. So when you run this application, whenever the cost is greater than 20,000, in that case the tax will be taken as 9.2, 7.4 and 15.2 respectively. For example, in case of first product, the cost is 20,000. In this case the condition is true, so the tax will be calculated as 10%. But in case of second product, the cost is 45,000. At that time the condition is false, So in that case, the tax will be calculated based on the percentage parameter for which you have supplied the 7.4 as argument. But now I would like to define a default value for the parameter. For example, I define it as 4.5. That means whenever you don't supply the value for this parameter, at that time only, the value of the parameter will be automatically taken as 4.5. Suppose in case of third object, we are not supplying the value for the parameter. So in that case, the default value 4.5 will be taken as percentage automatically. So in case of third object, the cost of the product is 36,000 and the default value of the percentage parameter is 4.5. And the condition this dot cost is less than or equal to 20,000 is false. So that is the reason it will come to the else case. And as per the else case, it will calculate the tax based on 4.5%. So in that way, the tax is 1620. So whenever you assign a default value to the parameter, in case if you don't supply the value for the parameter, at that time the default value will be taken into the parameter. But alternatively, even if you supply the value for the parameter while calling the method, in that case the supplied value will be taken into the parameter, but the default value of the parameter will be ignored at that time. So in real-time projects, when you want to take some value into the parameter automatically without depending on the method caller, in that case use the default arguments. This is all about default arguments in C#.